You're listening to the TV Obsessive channel, presented by TVObsessive.com. Okay, welcome back to the TV Obsessive podcast. I'm Cameron Crane, the executive editor, TVObsessive.com. I'm joined as always by Ryan Kirksey, esteemed writer and contributor to the site. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I am doing great. Very glad to be back. I was just outside catching crawdads and playing with a stick, misbehaving. That's what I was
Wow,
doing.
that's pretty good. Were you? Wait, were you really? All right.
No, no, no. I could do that down here in
I
Texas,
remember
but I'm just trying to channel some people we'll be talking about here today.
a crawdad and a crayfish is the same thing, or are they different things?
In Texas, it's crawfish. That's what we have.
Crawfish,
We
yeah.
we we, we eat those on basically everything here by the coast, but
I don't
crawfish
know.
is what we love.
We used to catch them. I grew up in the suburb of Detroit until I was like 11. We were right by the Rouge River, which is famously polluted and also makes a little appearance in Justified City Primeval, which premieres tonight. But we used to catch crayfish from this polluted river,
Ugh.
and we just like put them in jars and just like play with them and mess around with them. There was like an urban legend about that river when I was a kid. I don't know if this is still true. That the urban legend was about some guy who accidentally fell into the Rouge River and died. You know, so of course I'm out there messing around as a little kid. And we're like walking over logs, logs across the river. And I fell in one day and I freaked out. Anyways, maybe they go on that. But cool. So yeah, we wrapped up talking about the bear last time, which actually a couple of weeks ago. So apologies if anyone was looking for a podcast last week. We will try to be on the regular weekly schedule here as much as we can. So we're going to start talking about the Righteous Gemstones today, which Ryan has just started watching recently. But yeah, as first we're going to talk about what we've been watching besides that in sort of a casual way, avoiding spoilers, and talk a bit about what's in the news and so on and so forth.
Yeah, it's let's see. So today is July 19th, 2023. There's nothing going on in the world of entertainment news, right, Cameron?
No, it's 18th today. Maybe we'll release this tomorrow, but it is the 18th right now. I don't know. I just want to be accurate because, if something happens, we don't want to be like, oh, he didn't. Anyway, yeah, no. I mean, of course, the big news here since last time we met would be that SAG-AFTRA has gone on strike. During the WGA, the writers have been on strike since May. Certainly, with the actors getting involved, it really seems like it's kicked up a notch pretty quickly. Yeah, so I don't know what all we should say about that.
Yeah, I mean it's going to have ripple effects basically everywhere. If the writer's strike didn't already, this certainly will. For anything that was to the point where it could be in production or in filming or in promotion, that essentially stops right now. We've seen things like Cillian Murphy and the cast of Oppenheimer walk out of a screening in London once the strike kicked in, right?
Yeah,
So
because they called the strike during the screening,
exactly,
which I guess that
exactly.
I guess they had discussed that they were going to do that before the cast
Yeah,
was there. But people saw it coming.
yeah. But I mean, that makes a huge statement. That in this massive worldwide event that's about to happen this weekend, that they take a stand like that, and they should take a stand. It affects more than 160,000 actors and performers, and what they're fighting for is not for Cillian Murphy and Matt Damon's salary. They're fighting for the salary of these people trying to make a living, right? And it's just sort of the baseline for what they earn for these shows, and also the residuals from some of these streaming sites. So
Right. Yeah. I mean,
it's
I
all the
do.
way up and down.
Yeah, I do think it's really important for people to realize, and some of the stuff that's come out in the past week. Hopefully, people are paying attention. Seeing some of the stuff. I mean, you have actors from Orange Is the New Black sharing things about how paltry their pay was. And these recognizable faces. You say, "Oh, you're a celebrity," and they're like, "Here's my check for $27." All kinds of things. I think it is important for people to realize that there are all sorts of working actors out there, and not everyone is some A-list celebrity making millions of dollars. But also, I would add, even if it is, You know what I'm saying? You know, even if you are talking about someone who is making millions of dollars, there's still the question of whether the performers are getting their fair share for the work they're putting in order for this product to exist. You know, so I mean, and some of the things at stake in the strike also are very general. I mean, some of the stuff that they're concerned with about the possibility of the use of so-called AI, maybe more of a concern for the actors than the writers, even because the technology has gotten to where they can create a kind of facsimile. So this is one thing that's at stake, you know, and I hope people realize it's down to even whether they have to get the performer's consent,
Yeah.
both consent and compensation, you know. So potentially you have the AMPTP out there, and what they floated in the contract, as I understand it, is that they want to be able to take the actor's image and voice and manipulate them, you know, through computers and technological means for to do whatever they want, without even the performer having to consent to it. And you know, if you're me, I think they should have to consent and it should be paid. But more than anything, they should have to consent, in my mind, to like each and every instance. You know, I don't know. You have any thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, we used this example, I want to say several weeks ago, but does Disney and Lucasfilm get to use James Earl Jones' voice forever without his consent for Darth Vader? Do these actors get to, once they've lent their likenesses and their voices to these roles, does the studio, does the production company then have the right to use that in perpetuity? I think what you're saying and what I'm agreeing with is that they're fighting for the fact that no, that they should not be able to do that. They should have to give their consent each time that they're used and also be compensated fairly for that each time that they're
Yeah,
used.
totally. I mean, that's a position, yeah, that I would take for sure. I do want to also, since we're talking about this, take a moment to try to clarify a couple of things that have been buzzing around in the world. I think there's been some confusion. Like if you use Twitter, which I don't necessarily recommend, in general, but you know, there was something the other day, or someone was starting to suggest that maybe it wasn't okay for people to do things like what we're doing right now, or you know, writing reviews, engaged in film criticism, you know. And no, the unions are saying the unions have not asked us to not do this, first of all. And they did put out some clarification yesterday, thankfully. I mean, I never really thought that made sense anyway, but yeah, I don't know. There was something of a maelstrom of confusion. And also, they're not asking for a consumer boycott.
Right.
And I do think those things hang together in a certain way, because, like, it wouldn't make sense to say no one talk about this stuff at all unless you were also saying everyone boycott this stuff, in my mind. Yeah. But they're not asking for a consumer boycott. They're not asking for people to cancel their streaming services. So, you know, if you're mad at Netflix, as perhaps you are, if you're mad at Disney, as perhaps you are, if you read the quote from Bob Iger, you know, understandable. But just to know for anyone listening that if anything, the unions are saying that it may hurt their cause if those numbers are going down, because precisely want to argue about the value of the product that they've contributed to, and so on and so forth. So
very good point, because I've
yeah.
seen all over social media people posting about, oh, I've canceled all my services. Here are the receipts, right? And I'll rejoin once these people get back to the table and provide something fair to them. But then, yeah, you're right in terms of hurting the case. You know, subscriber numbers go down, eyeballs go down. You know, what are we doing if we're not trying to help the cause of those who are fighting for things like fair compensation and residuals? That does seem to be sort of counterintuitive to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough, you know. So, like, look, if at some point in the future, SAG-AFTRA, the WGA, you know, if the unions come out and say, "Hey, do a consumer boycott," that changes things, perhaps. You know, like,
yeah,
I guess I'm willing to say, like, leave it to them in terms of what they think is a good strategy. But I mean, I was just seeing someone today. There was a on Twitter, which is a terrible place. Like, anyway, there was someone who was literally a SAG-AFTRA strike captain telling people we're not calling for a boycott. Don't boycott. That might hurt us, at least for, catch up on your watch list, enjoy your shows, don't boycott, And there are people in the replies saying, well, I think I disagree. It was like, this is the union. Yeah. It's so frustrating to me.
So Cameron, what do you think? How wide a net will be cast with this? What will be impacted? What will we see in the fall when quote unquote new things are supposed to come back? How big a shadow will this cast over TV once we get into September and October?
Well, I mean, I think it's tough to say ultimately because we don't know how long the strike will last. But I think that your question is fair because we already can probably make some predictions going through fall. Like we were looking at the what Fox released for their primetime lineup. That's they're going to do a bunch of reality shows, and they've got the animation block, which I guess those shows are done, The Simpsons, and because they're generally on an earlier production schedule. Some other things, I don't know. I mean, clearly they have some things in the pipeline. I think it's probably fair to say if they've set a release date for it, like it's probably going to happen. But beyond that, there are a couple of things. House of the Dragon is apparently still filming because
now how can they get away with that?
I mean, I guess that the entire cast is British. I don't know. Is this is true? I didn't quite realize this, but look, I mean, there's a wrinkle here, but they're not scamming. People are worried about that.
Yeah.
They're in a different union, right?
Right.
The SAG-AFTRA is we're talking about a union in the United States, right? Mm-hmm. So British actors are, I think it's called Equity. I'm sure there's probably more to the name than that. People heard of Equity, but they're under a different contract, so they're not on strike.
Right.
Moving forward, depending on how the strike lasts, this could get complicated in terms of what does it mean to act in solidarity and so on and so forth. If this thing drags on and you start having production companies saying, oh, well, we're going to make new shows and we're just going to hire, entirely, British actors who are in this other union.
Yeah.
I think that gets trickier. But when we're talking about something that was already in production and they're under a different contract, I mean, of course, I think we hit on this before. There's also the wrinkle with House of the Dragon that the writers were already on strike. So, right. I mean, again, if you're me, you're already objecting to the idea that they're filming without writers on set. As I understand it, I believe that that's true. So,
yeah, and as a viewer of that show, I'm also objecting to the fact that they're doing it without writers on set. There's just such a complicated storyline, as the viewers know, that weaves through that to not be able to provide any critique, edits, shifting of things as they go along. That's not appealing to me just as average Joe fan out there.
Right. I mean, I was watching this relatively short interview with David Simon last night, which is from a couple of months ago. I don't know, watching YouTube clips. He was on Dan Le Batard's show, actually.
Oh.
And he was talking about this, and this was when the writer's strike had just gotten going. If people aren't aware, for some reason, David Simon's the creator of The Wire, amongst other things. And he was talking about the difficulties that potentially a showrunner can work, but a writer can't, and it gets into some very difficult questions. But he was saying how, for him personally, he wasn't going to go to set at all because he's just not doing it. Because what does it mean you can't do? If you want to rewrite a line sort of on the fly, some writers struggling with it or something like this, or there are little hiccups in the schedule and you want to do a quick rewrite to get around it, or if in the editing process you want to cut something and then you need to create a new short little scene in order for it to make sense. These are all things that they can't do.
Yeah.
So basically, if they're operating without writers, anything in production without writers can't do that kind of stuff. So,
and as we get into the fall, we're also looking at talk shows, Saturday Night Live, anything that has a writer is or the talent that would be involved in SAG, or those are basically shut down as well, and everything will be on reruns.
Yeah, and I don't know I don't know what their planned schedules were going to be, but late night shows have already been off the air. A number of things on HBO. Like I feel like maybe Real Time with Bill Maher, Last Week Tonight, maybe those things would have been on. Otherwise, I'm not sure what their schedules were, but the shows have writers, so
Yeah,
they won't be happening. For
it's
as long
a
as the writer's strike goes on, that's another thing, right?
yeah,
That
and I think
SAG-AFTRA could come to terms before the writers, or vice versa.
that's exactly right. And I think I saw this is the first time in 6 or 7 decades that these unions have not been operating at the same time. And so obviously, does that something that provides some leverage to those groups that, we sort of are at the nuclear option here where neither of these groups have an agreement and we have nothing to fall back on? Does that help their cause? So we'll just have to see. It's sort of unprecedented territory here.
I mean, I would think so, because the precedent is 1960, and the big headline of what the unions won in the strike in 1960 is residuals. The existence of residuals at all, which is kind of striking to think about from our perspective, that prior to that they didn't get any residuals. The concept, didn't exist, wasn't operative.
Yeah.
So the Emmys were announced. The nominees were announced
on the same day as the strike.
Yeah, on the morning. So I don't know. Any thoughts about the nominations? Anything stand out to you? Perhaps we'll just hit on this relatively briefly.
Yeah, this was, as you said, almost a week ago. I can't say I was terribly surprised by any of the shows or the shows within the categories that I saw. I saw announced some of our favorites that we've talked about before. Many of the shows that we cover on the site were nominated many times. The Bear got 13 nominations. I think Succession perhaps was expected, led with 27 nominations. But what caught my eye the most was that if you look at just the platform or the network or the channel that received the largest number of overall nominations, Max, Netflix, Apple TV Plus, Hulu, Prime Video, and Disney Plus far and away outpaced the others. And if you pay attention to that list, those are all the streamers, right? So I guess that's where all of our good stuff resides these days. And obviously the cable channels and the network channels got not next to nothing, but significantly less. That just stood out to me. That looks like those streamers are where the good shows are going these days.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess HBO is a wrinkle though, right? Because a lot of these are
HBO
shows,
Max,
which are still network shows, and everyone's confused about this. That but if it's an HBO show, that they still have that anchor in the cable network, and of course they're largely represented. But yeah, it's certainly a big shift. I mean, you're no longer seeing whatever's on prime time on CBS or something like this, tend to even register. So that is interesting.
If you go look at some of these names, it's almost like network TV is really hanging their hat on shows like Abbott Elementary right now, which carries a lot of nominations. There's just not many more that are not news networks or feature pieces that are getting these nominations. Yeah, there's just not much out there in network primetime anymore.
Yeah, I struggle to think of like a prestige network drama.
Yep. And the one cable network that found its way amongst that group, kind of in between the streamers and the networks, was FX, which is obviously, as The Bear, has a show that I think we're going to talk about in a second. It has quite a bit of that level that some of these streamers are seeing right now.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. Perhaps we should also mention, we're hitting on the Emmys, we're talking about the strike. We don't know in terms of, will the strike be over? Will they have the televised ceremony? They're supposed to be, the televised Emmys are supposed to be in September. All indications that I've been seeing seem to point in the direction that if the strike's still going on, they'll delay it. So, we'll keep an eye on that. What you want to talk about Top Chef?
Yeah, only other thing that caught my attention over the last week was something that was pretty highly anticipated, a show that I love. Top Chef named its next host after Padma Loxley departed after 20 seasons. So Kristen Kish, who won the 10th season of Top Chef and has been back as a guest judge many, many times, will be the new host of that show whenever that comes back and however that comes back. Not sure how these two strikes impact that show specifically, but the next show is scheduled to be in Wisconsin of all places, when we'll have Kristen Kish as the host at some point. So they have named their new person, and I guess now it's just a matter of when can they get back to filming some of these episodes. I mean, that they, I think, really hit a home run with this Top Chef All Stars that just aired a couple months ago. Got a lot of publicity as pulling in all of the global pieces of that, that huge brand now, and really was well received. So now they're at a huge turning point without their host of 20 seasons. I'm just looking forward to seeing what happens. I do like Kristen Kish. She was a good contestant, been a good judge. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's crazy. 20 seasons. I mean, I used to watch Top Chef, and I probably have not watched Top Chef in like 15 years. So it's weird that, oh yeah, that's still there. It's like that. Oh, Papa.
Yeah.
That would be weird to think about it without it.
If you haven't watched Top Chef in a while, watch the season 19, which was the Houston season. Not biased about that, just thought it was very good. And then there's a through line between that going into season 20, which was the Global All Stars. Okay. And you'll know what it is pretty soon after you watch those. But I thought those were two very well done seasons after, maybe a dip in the teens. I think they've really ramped it back up.
Cool. Yeah, and to hit on one thing you were mentioning, at least my understanding is, I think these reality shows will be moving forward because they're generally operating under a different set of contractual structures. And look, I don't know all the details here, but I think reality shows are generally going to be a go.
Yeah, that's my amateur understanding of it as well.
Yeah. Okay, so what have you been watching lately?
Well, I am still reluctantly and slowly making my way through Secret Invasion. I was trying to catch up last night. I don't know what this says about it, but in 2 separate episodes, I fell asleep twice. So this is not a good indication for somebody who is a diehard Marvel fan to say that it's not really piquing my interest. But man, there's so much opportunity there with spycraft in this show, and they just are. I think there's some missed opportunities. I'm going to be putting something out on the site at the end of the season. But I think there were just so many things they could have grabbed hold of and done with this show, but they've missed it for me. But I'll finish it out and give my sort of complete wrap up. But yeah, it's not looking good for those of us on the Marvel bandwagon these days.
No, that's a shame. Years ago, I mean, years ago, I watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and that was very bumpy in its first season. And I mean, is it reminiscent of that at all, or did you not watch that?
I didn't watch much past the first few episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There was always this weird thing with that show where they could never decide if it actually connected to the MCU or not. And how, there were some overlapping characters and overlapping stories, but they couldn't decide what they wanted to do with it. I think the problem with that show was they just, it was on network and they just had to stretch it out so long and tried to grab every storyline that they could. It just never connected for me. But I think, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, Secret Invasion is this incredibly popular comic book storyline that did so well about 15 years ago. And some of the surprises have been telegraphed. Some of the mysteries have been, I think, underwhelming. So it's got one more episode. It's got an episode tomorrow and then a finale next week. And then turn back over to the movies for a while, I think.
Right on. Yeah, I mean, I know I'm in the minority of individuals. So I got pretty into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There's some stuff, at least in the middle, that was really good. And I don't think I watched the final season because it shouldn't exist. Where I stopped watching was like, okay, this show is over. And then they came around there, we're going to make one more season. It's like, why? I just never watched it. I'm pretty sure that's right. But it was definitely a bit bumpy at the beginning. As you say, they kept it kind of weirdly disconnected from the MCU. And Yeah, it was
Yeah.
always kind of weird on that.
Well, I'm now pinning my Disney Plus hopes on a show coming out next month, Ahsoka, which is now sort of going to be we've got one pretty bad show in Obi-Wan Kenobi at the beginning of the year. We've got a really strong show in Andor. So now this is sort of who's going to get the best 2 out of 3 with that coming up here with this one. So I'm looking forward to that coming out next month. I think I've decided I'm going to do. I've never watched the animated Star Wars Rebels show before, and apparently that's good source material for this. So I'm going to try to plow through 4 seasons of that before August. But these are properties I'm invested in and have loved forever. So I'm hoping that they succeed. Ahsoka is giving me some hope where Secret Invasion has failed.
Yeah, I think people are looking forward to that.
Yeah,
and we'll see how it goes. You checked out Command Z, you said?
Yeah, well, I checked it out only because I'm digging into it after reading the piece on the site, which I believe you wrote, right? You wrote this piece on the Steven Soderbergh sort of sci-fi, very interesting. I guess we call it a show. It's kind of like little featurettes.
Hey man, they said it was a series. I honestly, it seemed to come out of nowhere. I didn't know about the thing until yesterday, and I'm in a position where I'm trying to pay attention to what's going on. Fan of Steven Soderbergh. So yeah, I went ahead and wrote an article on the first episode. The first episode being 8 minutes long.
Right.
But I felt like, well, there was enough there to talk about the show in general, and dig into the first episode. Now it sets things up, and I'm looking forward to watching the rest of it. I haven't gotten the chance to watch the rest of it yet, but it seems very entertaining to me so far. It's like very quirky and playing with the dystopian future, and
yeah. And I'm still unclear, where do we find this show? Do you have a succinct answer to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I put it in the article. My understanding is that this is the only place to find it is on the website.
Yeah.
Which oh man, I think it's like commandZseries.com, but I'm sure people can find it if that's not exactly right. And
you're right. I've got it pulled up right here. Yep, commandZseries.com.
So it was $8. The proceeds are supposed to go to charity. It seems like a cool little thing. From what I've read, I mean, I guess the whole thing's only 90 minutes, so part of me felt like I should watch the whole thing yesterday, but I had other stuff going on. Like, for example, I had to watch this other Steven Soderbergh project going on right now, Full Circle, which I'm writing on for the site.
Okay.
Have you watched that at all? You know what
this is? I'm surprised I've not seen this yet. This is like right in my wheelhouse, this type of show, but I've not picked it up yet. So I'm very curious to know your thoughts on it so far.
It's really complicated.
Okay.
It's good. I was just reading maybe it was an IndieWire, I think Ed Solomon, who wrote it, I guess, like wrote the story from 3 different perspectives and then combined them together in order to make this 500-page long script or something like that, which kind of tracks to me because it's you've got a bunch of different characters, and one would struggle to say who is like the protagonist. It doesn't really quite have that kind of structure. But it's complicated. It's fundamentally I should say like a thriller. I don't know that it's deep. Like, I don't know if I would use that word, but it requires thought and engagement to follow. And I mean, I'm enjoying it. I wrote on the premiere last week for the site, and I guess it's 2 more weeks. They released 2 episodes on the 13th, and then they're doing 2 on the 20th, and then 2 on the 27th. So,
these HBO limited series always seem to be quite strong. I remember just being rocked by Mayor of Easttown when it came out with Kate Winslet, and how good that was. Another one of these sort of gritty crime, big city pieces that was out about a year and a half ago. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily in that vein, it sounds like, but HBO producing something by this, by this director, it's something I think I'm going to check out inevitably.
Yeah, I mean, this is a Max original.
Oh, okay.
This is
Excuse me,
not, it's
Max.
not airing on the HBO network. It's a Max original. It's only on the streaming service. It's like, I will keep this straight, even if the rest of the world is
I have a
confused.
feeling I will never get those right.
It's it's terrible. Yeah, I mean, it reminds me in some ways of The Undoing, although I think I'd probably like I probably think Full Circle's better,
Okay.
but I was a little down on The Undoing ultimately. So for whatever that's worth. But it's got Timothy Oliphant in it. So it's like with the Command Z and then Full Circle and then Justified City Primeval. I'm really doing this kind of loop-de-loop of Steven Soderbergh and Timothy Oliphant.
This is something you have written about, the just in general the last Justified series. I've seen several things today, since today's the day that I believe that it comes out, talking about how strong this is as a limited series. And basically, it just seems like people just love to have Raylan Givens back in their lives. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. I've got screeners for it. We will have articles coming out on the first two episodes, which are tonight, Tuesday the 18th, at 10 p.m. on FX is when it premieres. So then I think maybe it goes to Hulu tomorrow. I don't know if it goes to Hulu immediately. It's supposed to be on Hulu, I think, ultimately. So yeah, I mean, it's really, I don't know, it's striking with because I was just rewatching some of the old show and it was like, yeah, it's Raylan. He has gray hair now. He still has the hat. And it's set in Detroit. So
yeah, I'm very, very curious to check it out. Boyd Holbrook, I believe, is the antagonist in this new series.
yeah.
If I understand correctly, he of the Indiana Jones henchman fame that just come out a couple weeks ago, right? Playing the blonde-haired Nazi in that movie. So yeah, he's kind of taken he's got a bad guy role going on.
Yeah, he's an Oklahoma wild man in this one.
Okay.
And Clement Mansell. The interesting tidbit was an interview with Timothy Oliphant that I was watching. This was with Rich Eisen. So it's just weird how like watching these sports guys, but they're interviewing anyway. That he was saying, I guess that Timothy Oliphant like pitched the idea of this series to Quentin Tarantino on the set of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You heard anything about this?
No, never heard of that.
Oh, this is quite interesting because apparently at one point Tarantino was considering making a movie out of City Primeval. He's an Elmore Leonard fan. He did he did not do Get Shorty. He did Jackie Brown. But yeah, so apparently he was into this idea, and that was part of what kind of got things in motion here. The book is not a Raylan Givens story, but they've taken this other Elmore Leonard novel and they've inserted Raylan Givens into it as the protagonist instead. Basically, that's my understanding. I haven't read the Elmore Leonard. But yeah, it comes out tonight. People should watch it. I'm looking forward to seeing what people think of it.
I can't wait. I'll be catching it just as soon as it comes out tonight.
Cool. Well, let's get to the Righteous Gemstones. I mean, I'm also watching Foundation. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But let's get to the Righteous Gemstones. So I guess potentially we're going to get into spoilers here, so we should do our general deal and take like 10 seconds. So we limit to season one. Spoiler warning for season one of the Righteous Gemstones. No, all right,
sounds good to me.
All right, so let's get back into this. The Righteous Gemstones, Ryan. You said that, so you've just recently checked out this series, perhaps on my recommendation. But I'm curious how it's been striking you. My understanding is you have gotten into season two at least, but we're going to try to limit ourselves to season one here, and then moving forward the next couple of weeks. So we'll keep talking about the Righteous Gemstones and catch up and talk about the end of season three, which is in a couple of weeks. So yeah, I mean, just want to start with, I don't know, general impressions and thoughts about the show.
Yeah, I will. It was almost exclusively on your recommendation and some of the things I was reading on the site that made me want to tune into this. Seeing that it's getting I think a lot of buzz as a third season, I thought, well, maybe it's about time for me to check this out. And there's probably one primary reason why I had not checked it out already. Um, I generally was not a Danny McBride fan before this show. I watched some of Eastbound and Down. That was not for me for whatever reason.
Like
Caught him on a
crass.
couple. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
You know,
understandable. It's very crass, and I
yeah.
understand. Like if you didn't care for Eastbound and Down, like, but there are too many, too much potty humor. Was it too many dick jokes? Is that the
But
problem?
that's the thing is
Fair.
there's plenty of that here in Righteous Gemstones as well, I'm loving it. So I don't know what the difference is. Maybe there's some things in this one that are hitting closer to home for me. But I had just mistakenly assumed that this was some kind of mockumentary about these big church and big production style preachers that just go and scam people for money. And there's certainly some satire about that, but it really I've found to be not that at all. My history, I've grown up in a conservative church. I live in Houston, where one of the originators of this movement, Joel Osteen, at the Lakewood Church, that my former boss used to call the most popular free psychologist in the world. This was just my impression of what it was going to be like, just sort of diving into how awful these things are, but it really is much more of a family show, and not family show in the terms that it's for families, but how you construct a family, how a family works together. And I've just been struck by sort of the heart behind it and some of the motivations of the characters, which are pretty relatable. When I thought, oh, this is just going to be something I'm not interested in, I really have fallen in love with it. I'm through the first two seasons now. Going to start the third season this weekend.
Yeah, no, I agree. And to be clear, if anyone's listening and has not watched this, we do not when Ryan says a family show, we do not recommend watching this with your children.
Nope.
Don't like don't sit there. No, I would not do that whatsoever. I don't have children, but I still would not do that. Yeah, no, it's interesting. I mean, I was talking a bit with Hawk about this, who's writing on the show for the site. And we were talking a bit about our backgrounds, which are perhaps, well, definitely, I'm getting the feeling, less involved in the world of the church and Christianity than yours. But what do you think though about the value of the show? Because I do feel like on the one hand, it is kind of lampooning something related to mega churches, something related to like the prosperity gospel kind of idea. But on the other hand, I feel like it's not anti-Christian by any means. Would you agree?
No, and I think that's what represents some of the heart behind the show. I wouldn't say that it's anti-Christian. I would say it's more anti pursue what you want and for with all means necessary to get those things. I've just found that the family behind this gemstone family behind the show, yes, it certainly is a satire, a lampoon, a really think piercing look at what those people can be like when you're talking about these mega churches and people that are really just overflowing with money, which is maybe outside or separate from the message that they're supposed to be preaching. But it's not an anti-Christian, anti-church show. It's more of a, what do you do to protect the things that you have and what's important to you? And this family seems to be struggling with what those things are.
Okay, yeah, interesting. You mentioned something about in your notes here about the father-son dynamics, which I thought was interesting to think about as something of a through line almost, right? Which in season one, did you see this? It focuses on the whole trying to extort money from Jesse, right?
Yeah.
That's like the main plot line in season one.
Yep.
And then you have the fact that it is Gideon who's a part of that. I don't remember. You watched this more recently to me. How soon did we find that out? Did we find that out fairly quickly?
It's about I think it's about midway through season one. We learn that his son is wrapped up in this plot to blackmail and extort his dad. based on some things they did at a prayer convention in the ATL.
ATL. This is referring to
Yeah,
the movie ATL.
right.
I love that man.
But it was interesting to compare. So Jesse being the Danny McBride's character, who is the son of John Goodman, the sort of titular gemstone lead pastor, patriarch of this family, and then Skylar Gazondo, who is Jesse's son Gideon. How Jesse is just constantly seeking approval while at the same time trying to maybe get his dad to move along so that he can take over. His son, Jesse's son, Gideon, has wanted basically nothing to do with that life. He's gone off to Hollywood, become a stuntman, and eventually gets wrapped up in a plot to try to blackmail his father. But both sides end up trying to reconcile, to repair those relationships. And the season sort of ends with how they're working towards that, particularly the Jesse and Gideon relationship. So I just thought that sort of father-son relationship, particularly when you're talking about the idea of Christianity and father and the son, sort of how that all connected together. It hit quite well. And I think that's part of that is why I've been able to turn on Danny McBride in this, because sure, he's crass and he's sort of lewd and all those things that he's been in the past, but he's able to deliver something that shows he can sort of hit those emotional notes that really made this something different than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree. I think you said already that the show just has a whole lot of heart, and it's interesting to me that certainly by the end of season one, I felt like, oh, I kind of love these crazy gemstones. I'm not sure I think that they're good people. Like this is really debatable, right? Like, they might not be good people, but kind of brought me around to sort of root for them in a certain way.
Yeah. But that's I think some of the criticism of these mega churches and these mega church pastors is that they have been so influenced by fame, by money, by prosperity, by people relying on them, that they have lost the meaning behind what they originally started to do, what it is that they're doing. And it seems like the Gemstone family is constantly fighting that tension of everyone loves them, everyone wants to be a part of their church, but they're still trying to save what's important to them, which is their family.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that space of that tension. The one scene that I remember, and I can't remember to quote, or even if I'd want to, I'd definitely be like cussing. But there's one scene where Jesse like cusses people out because he's trying to pray.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just thought it's great because it's like trying to like bringing together a certain kind of genuine sincerity or something.
Yeah.
But whereas, at least on a surface level, you'll get people saying that you ought not use bad language. And,
right.
I think he says something like, "I'm trying to pray, God damn it." Is that very amused by it.
I as someone again that grew up in a church and still does attend church, just love that sort of back and forth, sort of the two sides to every gemstone person they play, the person that they are when they're in front of the congregation or when they're trying to represent something, and the person they are behind the scenes, right? And I just thought there are deeper layers of that, right? Because what is the idea of Christianity if it's not the fight between who you want to be versus who you should be? And then they just, every character in some way embodies that to me.
Yeah, and then I think it really deepens it with interlude episodes.
Yes.
And also gives the opportunity for Amy Lee to be in the story in a certain way because of what she's passed. But the present day story, she's passed away. Thoughts on the interlude in episode one? And
I loved the interlude. Frankly, I love the Amy Lee character, and we see her there. We see her in some other flashbacks throughout the series, at least that I've seen so far. I found myself wishing that she was in the show more. I wish we had more of that character because she seems to be sort of this wholesome center that kind of drew everything together, sort of built what they had. and kind of was a moral compass to them. In addition to just being just sort of this stereotypical funny Southern belle that, that wanted to do all these good things. So I find myself wanting her more, but the interlude was so powerful to introduce what her power and influence was over everyone else, and how they're all maybe breaking apart because she's not with them anymore.
Yeah, you realize how much it is the kind of crisis of the aftermath of her passing, and it's her she's like the absent center in a meaningful way, I think. And I love the interlude episodes, and thankfully it seems like most people do.
Yeah.
But I could imagine something like, wow, what are you doing taking us a whole flashback episode? But like, I think they're great. The kids who play the younger versions of the of Jesse, of Judy, in particular, also in common, but I don't have the actors' names if they're any, but they just do such a great job, like mimicking the mannerisms of their older counterparts. And anyway, there's one of those each season, apparently. So I don't know if that's a spoiler for season 2 or season 3. It's a structural note. Okay, the interlude episodes are great, and then there's one of them each season. They seem to, the one thing that's giving it continuity is that form, and I totally agree that seeing Amy Lee involved is great.
It was interesting. I saw the first interlude not too long after watching the Fishes episode of The Bear season 2. Not to go into details of that, but just was reminded how much I thought that worked structurally. This idea of going back and looking at something, looking at a sort of grounded focus point from where a lot of this has grown. It just really worked for me.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because when I saw that episode of The Bear, one of my first thoughts was, oh, this is kind of like the interlude episodes in the Righteous Gemstones, but with way more anxiety. But yeah, I think there's a real similarity, and it's cool. And we need to talk about Baby Billy. Of course, it's in the interlude that you get Baby Billy and Amy Lee doing their classic song, Misbehavin'. That gets stuck in your head?
Oh yeah. It's been in my head for 2 weeks now since I watched that. I think I went and watched the video on YouTube. I have pulled up the lyrics. There are people who dissected the lyrics and put it to other music, auto-tuned it, gone every which direction with it. That song just needs to be a hit somewhere, but it's
got a good number of YouTube views, I think.
Yeah, it's incredible. And it just also, I think I saw that Danny McBride is one of the writers of the lyrics of that song. That just genius stuff that they put together as these two are obviously, we're talking about Uncle Baby Billy, Walton Goggins' character, who's Amy Lee's brother, and we're, I guess, child stars in the Christian, Southern Christian circles.
Right. There's a version of the song with them as kids also.
Yeah. And I just found not only that episode fascinating, but Walton Goggins' character is just, I just found him to be flawless. I mean, just who he's supposed to represent. And the type of person he is supposed to be, and having been around people that are somewhat like that in my past growing up here in the South. Gosh, I mean, just moving from his role in Justified into this role here, and sort of catching both of those recently, man, just blown away at how good he is.
Yeah, I love Goggins, man. I mean, I think in everything, go back to The Shield. You ever watch The Shield?
No, never.
It is pretty dark, and Goggins is definitely, veering into like some dark drama territory there, but he does a really good job of of course, on Justified, as you mentioned. And then he has quite a range. I mean, he was in I'm a Virgo, where he plays like a self-made superhero kind of figure. He's good in that. But man, Baby Billy is gonna be the standout for me, I think, when it comes down to Walton Goggins. So I'm trying to say it's already been one of my favorite actors. Before The Righteous Gemstones came out, I was like, oh, Walton Goggins is in this. And this is just, I mean, everything about Baby Billy, the way he talks, is this sort of drawl.
Yeah. I was trying to think if I could pinpoint a better accent that represents who a character is supposed to be. There have been some bad accents lately. You covered Silo. We've had some bad accent work lately. his accent as Uncle Baby Billy is just tremendous. I mean, I could just watch a YouTube video of him talking through the series.
Yeah, that's great. And then so he's caught up in, we were talking about Amy Lee as sort of the absent center. I think Baby Billy is sort of caught up in I'm sorry, I just started laughing to myself about the fact that they call him Uncle Baby Billy. But Baby Billy is caught up in, I think, wanting to recapture that fame or what have you, and as I recall in season one, he's upset because he's kind of on the outs, and then they give him this little church to run and so on and so forth, right?
They do. They give him a role running a, it's hard to call what they do a church plant. Church plant is usually 10 or 12 people who go and try to start something. He gets a church with 900 people that's a former Sears at a a mall.
Yeah.
And just what he does with that is just phenomenal. But he does, he wants more. He wants more to do. He wants to be more a part of that family, especially because he considers it was his family, his sister, that started all of this, and which sort of culminates in this confrontation between him and Eli Gemstone, John Goodman's character. And since we're going through this whole season, he ends up getting struck by lightning in the very last episode. And I think sort of the cliffhanger to the season is you see him kind of taking on this new persona of either the lightning preacher or the electric preacher, and he's going out starting this revival of somebody that came back from the dead, and you can feel kind of positioning himself to maybe take on something in the future.
Right, and then he's got Tiffany, which she's great too. And I was reading an interview recently with Goggins talking about the actress who plays Tiffany. His name is Valen Hall, I believe, and how great she is. He called her the pepper in the sauce.
Yeah.
I was reading this in print, but I couldn't help but read the words in not just Walton Goggins' voice, Baby Billy's voice,
and Uncle Baby Billy's
the pepper in the sauce.
She gets even better, I think, in season 2. But she is a really, I think, funny compliment as a very young, not too bright. I'm along for the ride, sort of riding the coattails of this famous Southern preacher. She does a pretty phenomenal job, especially moving forward.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just struck by it because Goggins was saying in the interview, like, he was saying she's great and she stands toe to toe with everyone in the cast and she's wonderful. Oh, wow. And he said something like, "There'd be no Baby Billy without her." It was like really glowing praise, which seems warranted to me from the performance. So
yeah. No, I just I try to think who would be the weak link amongst the cast. There's really not one, because even John Goodman, he's obviously a fantastic character actor and been on sitcoms forever. He does a really good job of, I think, showcasing this weight that he's holding without Amy Lee there, and how he's struggling to do it without her. And much of the emotion comes from what he does. I just, in that first season, I didn't find many weak links in terms of people that are just like, I could take or leave that character.
Yeah, no, I don't think there are, but you are putting me in mind of the fact that I think we should talk about BJ. Now, it's been a while since I've watched season 1, so I'm asking you to refresh my memory here a little bit about what all happens with BJ in season 1. I guess I'm also asking what you think of BJ at this point.
Yeah, most BJ has a much bigger role in season 2.
Yes, I do recall that.
Yeah, he tries to ingratiate himself more into the family and kind of distances himself in that season. But he's just kind of a whipping boy. He's got this, this I guess their fiance at this point, and Judy Gemstone. I find their relationship to be, in some ways, just completely over the top, but another way relatable, in that they struggle with things like how we interact with our separate families. They struggle with things like how we balance the things that we want to do versus the expectations that people have of us. They're ridiculous characters, but BJ and Judy, somehow that relationship works for me in terms of what they play with the story.
Yeah, I agree. And Judy is, I mean, I was saying earlier how it's like I love these characters. They feel like real people. It's like I love these people. I mean, Judy is a trip. I don't know. I don't know if we like. I don't know if I like actually want to be friends with Judy Gemstones,
No.
but I mean, Edie Patterson is just exceptional work, I think, and yeah, I mean, just a great show. So we'll talk about this more in the next couple of weeks. Other things you want to hit on before we wrap up here?
No, I mean, I really, if you were like me and on the fence or not check this show out, I just can't give it a higher recommendation, at least from what I've seen in the first two seasons. Every episode is about 30 to 40 minutes. The first two seasons each have 9 episodes. Really strong acting, really strong story. I think that there's a good mix of humor, of heart, of action. That's your thing. There's a lot of that as well in both seasons. I think I've turned a corner on Danny McBride now, after having watched these first two seasons. I'm a real fan of what he's doing with this.
Cool, yeah. Well, the hope is that this show keeps going for a while. Apparently, they have plans, ideas, and intentions to keep it going. So hopefully that happens.
Yeah.
Season 3 is also 9 episodes for what it's worth. If it happens to be the case that some people are listening who haven't watched the show at all, I mean, you could catch up. It would take some binging, obviously. But the season 3 finale, they're airing 2 episodes on July 30th, is what they're doing. So, we're recording this on the 18th,
Right.
so there's an episode on Sunday and then 2 episodes on the following Sunday. I have those dates right. 23rd.
That's exactly right. 23rd will be the 7th episode, and 30th will be the 8th and 9th, ending that third season. But yeah, I'd love to. Next week we can tackle season 2, and by then, a week later, we'll be ready to go through the entire season 3.
Yeah, I guess that's what we'll do. So, sounds good, Ryan. I look forward to talking about the Righteous Gemstones more with you. Thank everyone for listening here. Do check out the website, tvobsessive.com. You can follow us on Twitter, which I know I was discouraging you from using earlier, but if you do use Twitter, follow us on Twitter. Also on Facebook. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Caemeron CC, which you'd have to spell my name right. What about you, Ryan?
Yeah, same thing. I'll have something going up on the site soon about Secret Invasion, and I guess I've spoiled my disappointment for that. I'm at Cable Vox Score on Twitter, and looking forward to season 2 next week.
All right, sounds good. And you listen to the podcast you're listening to it already. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple, it's on iHeart, Audible, Amazon, other things. It's hosted on Podbean, so of course it's there. And also, we are posting these things to YouTube. Check out our YouTube channel. There's some other stuff there as well. Perhaps you're interested in. Subscribe to the YouTube channel whether you like it or not. You need to build that following, okay? But yeah, please, like, subscribe, leave us good reviews. Hopefully that's honest. And I suppose we'll leave it there. I'll see you next week.
All right, Caemeron. See you next time.
All right.